Audi's first full electric car, the e-tron, is a technological tour de force. This battery-powered large SUV takes the best bits from the brand's conventional crossovers and blends them with next-level electrification technology. There's a beautiful cabin, and we're even promised engaging driving dynamics. What's not to like? The price? Well, you can't have everything.
Like it or not, the EV era is upon us. Wisely, perhaps, Audi has taken its time in creating its first fully electric car, Ingolstadt having sat and watched others battle with inferior battery technology. Now, though, it's acted to try and redefine the standard in the battery electric vehicle segment. The first result of the company's efforts is this car, the Audi E-tron. If you're familiar with the brand, you're probably already familiar with the e-tron badge, most notably used on versions of the A3 and Q7 that embellished petrol engines with plug-in technology. Those models represented a warm-up act. Here's where the company's e-tron engineering starts getting serious. No fewer than 29 more full electric Audis are under development, including an e-tron GT saloon and an e-tron Sportback coupe-style SUV. For the time being, though, the most pressing need is for Audi to provide this technology in a large, luxury conventional SUV, so as to keep pace with premium brand rivals already active in this super sophisticated segment. Cars like Jaguar's I-Pace, the Mercedes EQC, BMW's iX3 and Tesla's Model X need to be faced by Ingolstadt's take on what a premium battery-powered electric model should be. EV goes Audi is the marketing strapline here. The brand really does feel it brings something new to the BEV segment. We'll see. It's convenient for automotive designers faced with electrification challenges that the market's crying out for SUVs, because a crossover's high-set practical body shape provides plenty of space to squirrel away all the necessary bulky batteries and awkwardly shaped electric motors without these things intruding into cabin passenger space. Here, that's particularly pertinent because, as well as a liquid-cooled 95 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack, there are two motors to package in, a big one for the rear wheels and a smaller one for the front. The result is a powertrain that weighs almost twice as much as a conventional engine and transmission package, but one which still claims to be able to deliver a class-competitive 241-mile WLTP-rated driving range. That all conforms to the segment standard, but Audi hopes that unique cabin technology will set this e-tron apart. Perhaps most notably, its virtual mirrors, L-shaped pods that replace ordinary door mirrors and transfer footage of what's happening behind to screens integrated into the doors, where door handles would normally be. But that's a bit of tinsel. The most important thing here is that Ingolstadt claims to have packaged up all the elements necessary to create Tesla-style technology with more polish and panache than anything previously seen in this sector, and delivered it in a car that drives, well, like an Audi, not some kind of automotive appliance. Is that what we've got here? It's time to find out. You might remember an advertising strapline insisting that the future is orange. Well, it kind of is here. That's the colour theme for the e-tron technology that will dominate Audi engineering for the next decade. The definitive expression, they hope, of the fresh fashion for plug-in performance. But is that something we should look forward to? Well, Audi hopes we can. Their e-tron engineers admired the Tesla models that founded the luxury EV segment, but they wanted their contenders to feel more like cars and less like very sophisticated automotive appliances. But how do you achieve that when you're battling with excess weight and completely different powertrain characteristics from those you'd get in a conventional engine, while at the same time asking owners to fundamentally alter the way they use and drive their cars? Every brand has its own perspective on this. Audi wants its operating systems to feel different, yet familiar. So the cabin and screen architecture's carried over from the brand's other large luxury models, but at the same time, there are plenty of bespoke electrified touches, like the way that pressing the start button activates a power meter in place of the usual rev counter, at the same time as the e-tron delivers a low hum, a ready chime, and a rather chintzy welcome jingle, signalling you to activate this curious thumb-activated silver gear selector. Select D, taking the fact that this Audi doesn't have the kind of conventional auto gearbox creep forward function that you'll find with some of its rivals, and ready yourself for the future of motoring, Ingolstadt style. Electric cars may have come on quite a lot since you last looked. With this one, there's an electric driveline that uses a particularly large 95 kilowatt-hour battery powering two electronically linked asynchronous electric motors, one on each axle, so creating the first electrified interpretation of quattro four-wheel drive. The motors deliver a prodigious combined output, 664 newton-meters of torque and total power of 408 PS, though these maximum figures are only on offer in the gear selector's performance-orientated S or Sport Boost mode, which lasts for just 8 seconds. After that, maximum power drops to 360 PS, then drops again in the unlikely event that you're still accelerating after a further 60 seconds. Either way, you'll quickly decimate the official WLTP-rated 241-mile driving range if you frequently try and replicate the 0 to 62-mile-an-hour time of 5.7 seconds, or regularly approach the claimed top speed of 124 miles an hour. Apparently, the development team just about managed to get this car to lap the infamous 20.8-kilometre Nürburgring Nordschleife racetrack twice at full tilt. You wouldn't think that such an escapade would be particularly enjoyable in a 2.5-ton SUV, particularly a battery-powered one. Actually, though, in its own way, the e-tron can be rather engaging. It's not quite as ludicrously rapid away from standstill as rivals like Tesla's Model X or Jaguar's I-Pace can be, but Audi says that's intentional, its engineers having striven to make initial throttle response a little more linear, which we rather appreciate. There's only so often you can enjoy a neck-snapping start before you and your passengers start feeling sick. But are they likely to start feeling nauseous as this huge piece of Ingolstadt real estate lurches around the bends? Well, no, not unless you're particularly ham-fisted. You can't, of course, get round the fact that this car weighs the same as a couple of family hatchbacks, but thanks to careful placing of the 700-kilogram battery pack and a consequently low centre of gravity, it actually carries its bulk quite well. Or at least it does on faster sweeping bends, which are dispatched imperiously. Try to take tighter turns at speed and the height and width of the car becomes very apparent, more so than is the case with that rival I-Pace. It's at this point that you'd appreciate more feedback from the progressive steering, which is accurate but no more responsive than it is in any of Audi's other larger models. Of course, none of this will be much of an issue when this car's being driven in the undemanding way a luxury large EV would tend to be. You only really tend to notice that it's electric during low-speed manoeuvring. At a cruise, tyre roar and wind noise tend to merely substitute themselves for engine rumble in your subconsciousness. And wind noise here is minimal because Audi's worked hard on aerodynamics, particularly the air curtains at the front and the slick, smooth underbody area, all of which has resulted in a sleek 0.28 CD drag coefficient. That's pretty good for a large SUV and can be reduced further to 0.27 CD if you opt for the optional virtual exterior mirrors, basically tiny cameras sticking out on stalks where the conventional door mirrors would normally be. These project an image onto little 7-inch OLED screens built into the interior door cards, which sounds clever but actually isn't an easy system to adapt to, so we'd suggest you try it thoroughly first before ticking that particular option box. What isn't extra is air suspension, a point worth making because you do have to pay more for it on that competing Jaguar I-Pace model. As we've said before, it's a feature we think is really needed on a car this heavy if you're to get the kind of cushioned ride that a luxury segment buyer has a right to expect. Speed humps and potholes are dealt with easily, and the system automatically lowers itself by up to 26mm on the highway to improve stability and aerodynamics. Plus, of course, the air springs are adaptive, influenced by your chosen setting from the Audi Drive Select driving mode system, which, as you'd expect, also alters steering feel and throttle response. On an e-tron, this setup has no fewer than 7 settings, efficiency, comfort and dynamic being the ones you'll use most frequently. There's also an auto mode if you can't make up your mind, an individual setting if you want to alter the system's parameters, plus all-road and off-road modes for rough surface use, both of which raise the air springs to their second highest level. Rough road use in an EV? Well, why not? This Audi doesn't claim to be a mud plugger, but it's perfectly capable of dealing with quite extreme surfaces like muddy fields, sand dunes and snowy tracks. The air suspension can, after all, raise the ride height by as much as 72mm. There's a manual option to do that, so across slidey or broken terrain, your e-tron can, if necessary, position itself as much as 248mm from the ground. In addition, the Quattro electric four-wheel drive system claims to be quicker than a conventional mechanical setup at distributing torque between the axles. It always defaults to a rear bias setup, but when necessary, can forward torque frontwards faster than you can blink, instantly combating wheel slip. In short, even in a blizzard, you'll reach your ski lodge in the Val d'Isère without breaking sweat. But it's more important to know that during the next snowy snap in the suburbs, the e-tron has your back. Audi claims it's well up to the task of towing too, capable of hauling up to 1.8 tonnes and incorporating a trailer stabilisation system that eliminates scary trailer sway at speed. Also a prime issue when it comes to peace of mind is braking capability, always of particular importance when the car in question is enormously heavy and potentially frantically fast. You'll probably already know that electric vehicles rely on the drag of regenerative engine braking to scrub off speed far more than their ordinary friction wheel discs. So far, with EVs though, those two systems have always remained separate. Cleverly, this e-tron's integrated electro-hydraulic brake control system combines them. Depending on the situation, this setup decides whether to decelerate using the electric motor, the wheel brake or a combination of the two, acting on each axle individually. Most of the time, in the interests of energy harvesting, the conventional wheel brakes are ignored. In fact, they come into play only if you put more than 0.3 grams of weight onto the brake pedal. That might sound as if not much retardation happens unless you really stamp on the anchors, but you'd probably only think that if you hadn't experienced the full extent of regenerative braking possible in a modern EV these days. It's considerable, particularly if you use these steering wheel paddles to select the highest level of regeneration possible. Or you can select an automatic recuperation mode from the central MMI screen if you want the car to choose the correct level of regeneration for the type of driving you're doing. Either way, an electro-hydraulic actuator allows the brakes to build up pressure roughly twice as fast as a conventional system, which in an emergency stop is supposed to shorten your braking distance in this car by around 20%. So there are lots of reasons why you might like an e-tron once you've decided whether you're happy with the operating range it offers and whether you can live with a public charging structure woefully underprepared for the kind of technology that cars like this can now offer. Like its competitors, Audi talks airily of 150 kilowatt DC charging stations that can recharge up to 80% of battery capacity in just 30 minutes as you sip a restorative coffee, ignoring the fact that for the time being, 150 kilowatt charging points in this country are rarer than unicorns. Which means that, the way things are at present, you're going to have to very carefully plan lengthier excursions, you're going to need a carefully thought out overnight charging regime, and you're going to need mastery of this car's regenerative range extending technology. And even with all that in place, you'll probably still require a second fossil-fuelled luxury car for longer trips. If all of that can work for you, there's no reason why an e-tron wouldn't too. As with more conventional Audi models, it isn't best in class in many particular areas, but it's there or thereabouts in all of them to an extent that creates a very complete product indeed. You'd know this was an Audi. You might not immediately recognise, though, that this is an EV. Direct rivals like Jaguar's I-Pace and the Mercedes EQC intentionally deviate from brand styling expectations to emphasise their electrified remit. With the e-tron, Ingolstadt hasn't felt the need to do that, though we're told that its design is just as unique. It's sized between a Q5 and a Q7 and shares the basics of its MLB Evo platform with those cars. But Audi says the only carryover mechanical parts are the steering and the air suspension. Which may be true, but this doesn't have the feel of a completely clean sheet design. The kind of thing that allowed Jaguar with the I-Pace to somehow create a lengthy wheelbase in a relatively short car. But then you don't get that either with the most obvious rival EV models in this segment, the Mercedes EQC or the BMW iX3. Starting the design of a car like this from a completely fresh sheet of paper certainly allows for a degree or two more innovation, as Volkswagen has proved with its bespoke electrified MEB platform in the class below. Here, though, we've got a more conservative approach that's been conservatively packaged with familiar Ingolstadt styling cues like the sharp headlights and the e-tron branded chrome-framed octagonal grille that characterise this very Audi-like front end. Closer inspection reveals that the slats beneath the silver vertical struts are mostly enclosed and all coloured in platinum grey. Apparently, that's an identifying feature of Audi's EV models, as is the specific daytime running light signature of the LED headlamps, which can, on request, be specified with the brand's adaptive matrix technology. Further down, there are those curious angled corner air inlets at each side, plus a lower silvered skid plate to underline this model's SUV pretensions. From the side, you realise why this car hides its bulk so well. It's actually almost as long as an A6 Avant Estate. A nice touch is the inclusion of charging flaps on both sides of the car behind the front wheel arches. They open with a push of a button, which is neat, and when they're closed, form the starting point for a mid-level crease line that flows back through the door handles. Just below the C-pillar, a higher crease then curves up and eases back into the rear lamp cluster to emphasise what Audi calls quattro blisters over the rear wheels, which is supposed to hint at the electric four-wheel drive system. A lower level crease gives the flanks some extra shape, and it sits just above a lower sill area that's boldly contoured with black door trim inserts, intended to help you visualise the location of the battery that represents the car's energy centre. Plus, of course, there are big wheels, 20 inches here, with bigger 21-inch rims available on request. This car's actually narrower than some of its key rivals, but Audi wants you to think the opposite, hence the use of this wide LED light strip connecting the LED tail lamps, a feature of all the brand's current luxury models. The illuminated tail lamp signature echoes the graphics of the front daytime running lights, and transverse louvers on the side of this lower diffuser draw attention to the lack of exhaust pipes, again spotlighting the electric all-wheel drive system. As usual, of course, what's more important is the stuff you can't see. And thanks to the sophisticated aluminium structure needed to protect the 95 kilowatt-hour battery, Audi reckons that this e-tron is 45% more torsionally rigid than a conventional fossil-fuelled SUV, which, of course, brings corresponding benefits in terms of handling and acoustic comfort. OK, so it's fairly conservative looking outside. Is that theme carried through to the cabin? Let's see. In a word, yes, but if you're an Audi brand loyalist, or even perhaps if you're not, you'll probably like it very much indeed. Those familiar with current A6, A7 or A8 models will be right at home with the two central MMI touch response displays, which blend into vast swathes of piano black trim. But there are differences here too. A wraparound trimming arc envelops the outer perimeter of the dash, finished in a rather curious strain of open-pore grained ash that's exclusive to the E-tron. There's orange-themed lighting around the cabin at night, and the backrest upholstery stitching is designed around a motif reminiscent of electric circuit boards. More significant differences can be found in this wide centre console between the seats, which of course on an electric car like this doesn't have to accommodate a bulky transmission tunnel. So Audi has instead created this multi-faceted compartment to fill the space, a storage area which looks like it should be lidded but isn't, and which rests on open sidewalls, intended to lend to it the feel of a light, sleek sculpture. Actually, this aspect of the design is just annoying, because items you stash in here tend to fall out if you corner too enthusiastically. You might also take issue with this unusual gear selector, operated by a hand rest which appears to float above the console and is activated by a one-touch action conducted with either thumb or index finger. It feels awkward at first, but it's one of those things you'll adjust to and possibly get to rather like. You could perhaps make a similar observation about this car's technological party trick. Its optional virtual exterior mirrors claim to be a world first, but actually first used on the limited-run Volkswagen XL1 eco car back in 2013. They've not been fitted on this test car, but when they are, they amount to what is basically a GoPro-style camera sticking out on a stalk where the door mirror would normally be. The cameras project their images back to a pair of little 7-inch OLED screens, one on each side of the front of the car, positioned just here at the top of the door card, just below the window glass. Audi says it offers them for two reasons. First, to improve aerodynamics. They reduce the drag coefficient from 0.28 to 0.27 CD, which apparently adds in a few extra miles of driving range. And second, as a safety feature, the brand pointing out that virtual exterior mirrors are clever enough to use navigation data to automatically vary the style of their projected image to give you a clearer rearward view in 3 driving environments: highway use, turning and parking. They can be adjusted and folded just like normal mirrors too. Our perspective on their safety value is a little different. First, when you want to look behind you and you're not using your rearview mirror, it's simply not natural to look at the top of a door panel. You could perhaps get used to that over time, but more of an issue is that the OLED screens are prone to reflections and sun flare, plus they're fiddly to adjust. You have to drag your finger around the screen. The whole concept here will certainly get your passengers talking, but whether you'd really want to live with it is another question entirely. In any case, this cabin already has enough screens. The one you'll use most is the virtual cockpit display, which is the 12.3-inch TFT digital monitor you view through this 4-spoke wheel. It's obviously got a few more features for battery-powered motoring, principally this left-hand power meter, which shows either the percentage of battery power you're using, if you're accelerating, or the amount of battery regeneration you're enjoying, if you're off-throttle or braking. For the centre of the display, there are some extra selectable range readouts too, but otherwise the virtual cockpit setup works just as it does in other Audis, with 2 main layouts you can switch between using this view button. There's a classical view that prioritises a couple of prominent dials separated by an information screen, and an infotainment mode which shrinks the pair of gauges to allow more central space for various data readouts or a rather cool full-width navigation setup. All of this works, of course, in concert with the 2 MMI touch response centre stack monitors we mentioned at the beginning. To be frank, we have some reservations about this layout, mainly because it relies almost entirely on screen touch and voice control. To be fair, this twin-screen setup does work a little better than the similar one found on Range Rovers and Jaguars. First, because there isn't really anything very significant you have to look down to see on the lower screen. And second, because all the functions incorporate haptic feedback, which sees the touchscreen surface emit a little tactile and acoustic signal when a function is pressed. The higher monitor is 10.1 inches in size and features tile apps that you can move around with the kind of drag and drop functionality you'll be used to from your smartphone. They deal with the most important radio, media, telephone and navigation functions. Plus, as you'd expect, there's the usual Audi smartphone interface compatible with the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto systems. And of course, you get a full suite of Audi Connect media connectivity features that, amongst other things, deliver online media streaming, a Google Points of Interest search function, a comprehensive Audi online traffic information system, plus news and weather feeds via a Wi-Fi hotspot, supporting the new super-fast LTE Advanced mobile data network. Configurable favourites buttons help tailor the system to user preferences and allow up to 7 drivers to store their preferred settings in individual user profiles and set up to 400 parameters. And there's a particularly useful car section that gives you all kinds of helpful driving range, charging and efficiency-orientated readouts. The lower monitor, which is 8.6 inches in size, is reserved for more comfort-orientated features, though its screen can also be used to trace letters that the search system can then use to give you selection options. Of course, you might expect that to be just another thing that would leave these shiny displays continually coated in grubby fingerprints, and you might also worry about sunlight reflection. Audi's tried with partial success to mitigate both of these issues by use of an anti-fingerprint coating and a layer of anti-glare film, but to some extent both problems still remain. What we do like about this setup is the way that the upper screen can be turned off to prevent nighttime distraction, and its main functions summarised on the top part of the lower display. Enough on screens. The leather-stitched seats are superbly comfortable and position you fairly loftily. You certainly sit higher than you would in a rival Jaguar I-Pace. Now, that's one of the reasons why forward vision here is excellent. Your over-the-shoulder view isn't quite so great. The rear pillars are quite thick, so it's just as well that parking sensors and a rear-view camera are standard fit. And what else? Well, fit and finish from the Brussels factory is pretty much faultless. And of course, as usual with Audi, that bulletproof quality is backed up by lovely soft-touch plastics, fashionable strip lighting, chrome highlights and lashings of leather. For us, it's a class above what you get in that rival Jaguar and vastly better than what's on offer in competing EVs like the BMW iX3 and Tesla's Model X. A few words on storage. The open-sided box between the seats that we mentioned earlier incorporates a cup holder beneath a louvered cover and a whole stack of media stuff. A wireless charging mat plus SIM and SD card ports, a 12-volt socket and twin USB points. Behind all this is an armrest which covers a flock-lined box, and there's a big LED-lit glove box incorporating a pen clip. Audi's forgotten to build in an overhead sunglasses compartment, and you'll only find a ticket clip on the driver's side sun visor. But you do get deceptively large door bins and a surprisingly big storage compartment by the driver's right knee. OK, let's take a seat in the rear. Now, we touched briefly on the e-tron's lengthy dimensions earlier. It's 140mm longer than a rival Mercedes EQC and 219mm longer than a Jaguar I-Pace. In fact, in this segment, only the Tesla Model X is lengthier. All of this should bode well for rear seat space. So let's take a look. There's certainly plenty of room back here for a couple of 6-footers to get very comfortable indeed. And you could say the same of a rival Jaguar I-Pace, but the rear section of this e-tron's roof doesn't curve down quite so sharply as that of the Jag, so there's less of a claustrophobic feel. Inevitably, you'll be much less comfortable if there are three of you and you're stuck here in the middle, where the seat is narrow and has a stiffer backrest. But at least there's no prominent central transmission tunnel to impede you, though. Just above it are twin vents, a 12-volt port, and if you've paid extra, twin USB ports too. If you've also paid more for the 4-zone climate control system, you also get this smart control screen for it here too. Should there be just a couple of you, you'll be able to retract this armrest, which has a storage compartment, but rather meanly only includes cup holders if you pay Audi extra for its optional storage and luggage pack. There are overhead reading lights, decently sized door bins, and seat back net pockets. As with the rival Mercedes, BMW and Jaguar models we mentioned earlier, Audi's chosen not to try and emulate the other major contender in this segment, the Tesla Model X, by offering an optional third seating row at the back, which could be significant for some family buyers. But if that's not an issue, you shouldn't be disappointed by the cargo spaces this e-tron can offer. Yes, cargo spaces. There are two of them. And we'll start with the one up front. Now, Audi designers haven't wasted the extra room created by the lack of an engine up front, so e-tron buyers get a fruit or a frunk or whatever else you want to call it beneath the bonnet. You could complain rightly that it's not very big, but we point out that this 60-litre space is more than double the size of the front compartment you get in an I-Pace, which is quite significant because it makes it big enough for the storage of the two charging leads and saves them cluttering up the boot. The tailgate's power operated, of course, and once it's completed its arthritic progress upwards, a decently sized 600-litre boot is revealed, which is about 100 litres more than you get with those Jaguar and Mercedes rival EV models we were just mentioning, though not quite as much as is provided by a 5-seat Tesla Model X. Unfortunately, unlike all three of those competitors, you have to negotiate this high loading lip in order to reach the cargo area, and that's topped by this rather impractical silver panel which will quickly attract scratches and scrapes. More positively, you get some useful underfloor storage space, though of course much of it will be used up if you're wise enough to specify the optional spare wheel that sits in this deep well. That optional storage and luggage pack we mentioned earlier gives you these useful luggage compartment side nets, plus a net you can attach to the 4 chromed tie-down points to stop small items from rolling around the boot floor. If you need more room and need to fold the rear bench, you'll be pleased to find that A, it can be retracted using these levers in the cargo bay sidewalls, and B, that it retracts in a convenient 40-20-40 split so that longer items like skis can be pushed forward between two rear-seated folk. Fold everything down, and though the cargo space created isn't quite flat, there's no step up to the rearward part, and you get 1,725 litres of total space. With that rival Jaguar model we mentioned, the back seats only fold 60-40 and retract to reveal a space with a quoted dry item capacity that's a massive 562 litres smaller. Makes you think, doesn't it? From launch, Audi offered a couple of limited edition versions of this car, but most sales were based around the standard 55 Quattro version, which is what we've got here. At the introduction of this model, it was priced from around £72,000. As usual with an EV, a £3,500 government grant towards purchase can be subtracted from that figure. Buyers of this standalone 5-door SUV body style get one all-electric package with a 408 PS power output. That figure accounting for 55 series badging, which applies to all Audis with an output in the 333 to 408 PS bracket. In this case, the powertrain's based around a single 95 kilowatt-hour battery, good for 241 miles of WLTP-rated driving range. A setup which powers 2 electric motors that together create an all-wheel drive powertrain. We'll get into where that kind of pricing fits within the luxury EV market in a moment. To start with, though, let's give you an Audi range perspective. An e-tron is sized between the brand's Q5, which prices from around £42,000, and a Q7, priced from around £53,000. But those are figures that would get you only smoky diesel power. Perhaps a more relevant Audi range comparison would be against the Q7 e-tron, which mates a diesel engine with a plug-in electric motor. One of those would save you around £4,500 on this full electric e-tron model. But obviously, it's a very different kind of product. Audi has also developed petrol-electric plug-in versions of its A6, A7 and A8 large luxury models, pitched either a little below or a little above e-tron price levels. But the whole reason that many will be considering this full electric EV in the first place is because they want to be free of fuel stations for good. If that's your perspective, the only alternatives to this car you'll be interested in are those in the rapidly expanding luxury BEV or battery electric vehicle market. You'll be forgiven for not knowing your options in this segment, since so many of them are either recently announced or just about to be launched. The key differentiating factor between the various contenders is driving range, which will quote to the current WLTP or World Harmonised Light Vehicle Test Procedure System standard. If the figures you come across vary significantly from the ones we're about to give you, it could be because they've been sourced using the old and far less accurate NEDC or New European Driving Cycle standard. Ask if you're not certain, so as to ensure that apples are always being compared to apples. As you might expect, Audi's key premium brand rivals all offer luxury SUV-orientated EV products that directly compete with this one. 6 months prior to this e-tron's arrival on the market, we saw the introduction of Jaguar's I-Pace, which has a slightly smaller 90 kilowatt-hour battery, but weighs quite a bit less, so can offer a WLTP-rated driving range that's 51 miles greater than this e-tron. The Jag's a little cheaper too, priced from around £65,000, but you have to pay extra for the air suspension that Audi includes as standard. In fact, once you've matched specs with these two cars, you'll find that price difference narrowing substantially. 6 months after the e-tron's arrival here, we saw the introduction of another key rival, the Mercedes EQC. And this model also has a slightly longer range capability than an e-tron, a WLTP-rated 259 miles, but uses a smaller 80 kilowatt-hour battery and offers a significantly smaller boot than that of this Audi. We're less convinced that a potential e-tron buyer would consider BMW's initial entrant into this segment, the iX3, because this is just another X3 derivative with basically the same body style. It can be quite a bit cheaper than this Audi, but sharing a combustion engine body shape design hasn't allowed the Munich maker to maximise the interior space that a battery powertrain makes possible. So an iX3 really feels a class smaller than an e-tron inside. Plus, the BMW has a much smaller 70 kilowatt-hour battery, though thanks to the car's relatively light weight by class standards, that's still enough for it to deliver a claimed 249-mile WLTP range. And what of Tesla? Well, Audi, like Jaguar, Mercedes and BMW, tends to loftily try and ignore the American company products when it comes to talking about direct rivals, but you shouldn't. In fact, we'd suggest that if you want a luxury BEV, the US brand has 3 cars you might find difficult to ignore in this segment. Only one of them is an SUV and therefore directly comparable to an e-tron. Launched here in 2016, the Tesla Model X was the very first large all-electric SUV and remains a key competitor for this Audi, even though it's a slightly larger car with prices which start at around £75,000, slightly above what you'd have to pay for a base e-tron. It also doesn't help this Tesla's cause that the base figure gets you only a standard range variant, which has an operating capability of only 230 miles. You'll need to pay £10,000 more for a long-range Model X variant, which can go up to 315 miles if you're to get that car in a form that can go further between charges than this Audi. We mentioned 3 competing Tesla options, assuming that you're not especially hung up on the idea of having an SUV, and we think many potential luxury segment BEV buyers won't be. You'll want to consider the Tesla Model S, which, though it's a 5-door, competes primarily in the luxury saloon segment. At the time of this test, around £72,000 was enough to get a standard range Model S with a 280-mile range, and around £81,000 would get you a long-range Model S variant with a substantially better 375-mile range. The handling of a Model S, though, simply isn't in the same league as that of an e-tron. Closer, in terms of drive dynamics, is the American brand's Model 3. That's a saloon and, though much smaller inside than this Audi, is significantly cheaper, with prices for the base Standard Range Plus version, which has a 258-mile range, starting from under £40,000. A more direct e-tron competitor is the Model 3 long-range all-wheel drive variant, which at the time of this test cost just under £50,000 and offered a 348-mile driving range. That's it for all electric options. Now, obviously, there are plug-in hybrid models in the luxury segment. e-tron money would, for instance, get you very well-specified plug-in petrol-electric versions of the BMW X5, the Mercedes GLE and the Porsche Cayenne. But that's not quite the same thing. As we said earlier, the whole reason many customers will be considering this Audi will be because they want to get away from fossil fuel. If that's the case for you, and having considered all the competing BEV segment options we've just talked you through, you decide that it is an e-tron you really want, then you're going to need to know just how generous Audi has been with the standard spec. So let's go on to have a look at that now. Unlike BMW and Jaguar, Audi includes air suspension as standard for its EV. Given the weight of this kind of car and the effect that can have on ride quality, it's a feature we see as pretty much essential. In this case, it's a fully adaptive system that works in conjunction with the 7 settings of the Audi Drive Select driving mode setup, automatically regulating ride height and damping as necessary, and including a self-levelling suspension and manual lift function. There's also a Quattro electric 4-wheel drive system and progressive steering, which reduces the effort needed for low-speed manoeuvring but alters its ratio at higher speeds so that it feels more direct through corners. As usual with an EV, you get a couple of charging cables, a Mode 2 lead for plugging into a conventional socket, and a Mode 3 cable for use with wall boxes or AC public charging points. What's unusual here, though, is that Audi provides a charging flap on both sides of the front of the car, so you're not constantly trying to stretch the lead you need to a single point. Other standard e-tron features include an impressive range of camera-driven safety features, and we'll get onto those in a few minutes. And most of the luxury niceties you'd expect on a car of this price. These include full LED headlights, 20-inch 5-arm dynamic alloy wheels, a power-operated tailgate, an anti-theft alarm and a high-gloss pack, which finishes the roof frame and window trims in aluminium. Inside, you'll find twin leather, full leather upholstery, the seats at the front featuring heating, electric lumbar support, powered adjustment and a memory function. There's also an LED interior lighting pack, an auto-dimming rear-view mirror, a rear-view camera, cruise control with a speed limiter, a removable rear net partition for the boot, and deluxe 2-zone electronic climate control that can be programmed to either heat or cool the car before you get into it. Replacing conventional gauges in the instrument binnacle is the 12.3-inch Audi virtual cockpit screen, a high-resolution, customisable LCD monitor with virtual dials and 3D graphics. Talking of digital displays, infotainment's taken care of by Audi's MMI Navigation Plus with MMI Touch package via a 2-screen centre dash layout design that the e-tron shares with its A6, A7 and A8 showroom stablemates. There's an upper 10.1-inch monitor, primarily for Audi's MMI navigation package, and the 10-speaker 180-watt DAB sound setup, and a lower 8.6-inch display used mainly for the car's two-zone electronic climate control functions. Via the upper screen, you can use the standard Apple CarPlay or Android Auto smartphone mirroring setup. Plus, there's voice activation, the usual Bluetooth Audi music interface, and various other informational features showing you range and battery information. You also get the useful Audi Phone Box package, which can wirelessly charge your phone and improve its reception with LTE support. As an included part of this whole MMI system, there's a 3-year subscription to the Audi Connect media connectivity package, which works via an embedded SIM card that's permanently installed in the car and operates on a data flat rate. So you won't be stung with high roaming charges if you do a bit of intercontinental motoring. The setup comes with an LTE data transmission module that establishes high-speed 4G Internet 3 access and creates in your e-tron a Wi-Fi hotspot supporting the super-fast LTE Advanced mobile data network. Through the Connect system, you can access special in-car versions of your Facebook and Twitter pages, and it's possible to read, write and send text messages and emails. The included online media streaming package gives access to millions of music tracks, and there's also a clever Audi online traffic information system that uses live traffic information to reroute you around jams. There's also the Audi Music interface, which offers simple pairing with your mobile devices using 2 USB ports with charge and data functions. Also built into Audi Connect is the Car2X services system that the brand's developed in partnership with Daimler and BMW. That allows this Audi to often almost magically respond to future weather or traffic conditions, or to somehow know what's around the next corner. It's not magic, of course. The setup instead driven by a mobile phone-supported so-called vehicle swarm exchange of information system that'll see your e-tron sending data on driving conditions back to a central hub, which then shares it with other drivers. What else? Well, you can take Audi Connect connectivity with you even when you're not with your e-tron, thanks to the improved My Audi app. This transmits points of interest to the navigation system, streams music, and can transfer your calendar to the MMI infotainment screen. The app also allows you to seamlessly plan a route across multiple devices. So, if you're going to a restaurant in an unfamiliar city, for example, and have to park a few streets away from the venue, navigation will continue with you on your smartphone as you complete the journey on foot. Finally, as usual with vehicle apps of this sort, you can use it to get a vehicle status report and to lock or unlock the doors from wherever you are. And of course, as you'd now expect with a luxury EV, you can use it to program your chosen charging regime. On to options. And when this car was first introduced, many key items were included on a limited run launch edition. But we're going to assume that you've got a standard 55 Quattro version like this, and you're seeking to equip it with the right blend of extra cost, technological, luxury and drive features. As on any EV, before you start spending any additional cash, budget first for the installation of a charging wall box in your garage if you haven't already got one. Audi has a compact e-tron charging system consisting of a control unit and a Type 2 Mode 2 cable, and it can be fitted by the brand's installation partner PodPoint for £359. Plus, for another £150, you can specify a neat wall-mounting bracket for it to sit on. Otherwise, probably the most notable extra you could consider are the virtual door mirrors we just mentioned. These replace conventional door mirrors and project images onto little OLED screens mounted on each front door. They certainly look sophisticated, but not everyone likes the way they work in practice. Looking down to a door-mounted screen rather than an exterior door mirror takes a bit of getting used to. Try before you buy is our advice, especially since for this one extra, Audi charges a cool £1,250. We'd be more tempted to go for 3 easier-to-live-with extras that have been fitted to this particular test car. Advanced key keyless entry, a 360-degree surround view camera system, and the B&O premium sound system with its thumping 16-speaker, 705-watt output. Rather than specifying these things individually, it makes more sense to get them as part of Audi's optional comfort and sound pack, which also throws in multicoloured extended LED interior lighting. Another thing that can be ordered separately, giving you 6 colour profiles, each with 30 different shades. Other individual extras fitted to this car that you might want include privacy glass and acoustic glazing for the side windows. There's also an air quality pack with ionisation to help air intensity, plus 2 selectable scents, which you can project into the cabin at 4 levels of intensity. Lovely. If this car was ours, we might also want the cool front seat ventilation, front seat massaging, a heated steering wheel, heat for the rear seats, and the Audi Beam Plus feature that projects the E-tron brand name onto the ground when you open a front door at night. Talking of lights, the Audi Matrix LED headlamps are a popular option, working with information gained from the vehicle's sensors, its cameras and its navigation system to project precisely the right light beam ahead of you at any given time. The Matrix headlamp upgrade can be ordered and somehow remotely installed via a so-called over-the-air update, which is rather cool. What else? Well, the 2-section panoramic glass roof would be nice to have. Its front section opens electrically, and there's a power door closure feature that sees doors automatically pulled into a lock position when not fully latched. Folk in the rear will be better served for their devices if you specify the Audi Music interface in the rear package, which gives those in the back a pair of USB ports with charge and data functions, plus a couple of extra USBs in the front too. And talking of sitting in the back, it'll be a more pleasant experience if the 4-zone deluxe automatic climate control system has been specified, there to give rear seat passengers their own climate zone. Now, we mentioned earlier that the car's climate systems can be preset. Well, many e-tron buyers also pay Audi another £100 for the Comfort Remote Preconditioning feature that gives you quite a lot more functionality options when it comes to being able to do the same thing from your smartphone via a My Audi app. Key driving features include a park assist system that'll search for spaces and steer you into them, and that seems reasonable value at around £400. We'd be less interested by the thought of blowing nearly £1,500 on optional head-up display or having to find £2,200 more for the night vision assistant, which assists the driver at night by displaying a thermal image of the surroundings. Using this, if the system thinks you might be about to hit either a person or large animal, the object is highlighted in yellow on the virtual cockpit screen. If your e-tron has the Matrix headlights fitted, the object will be flashed at too. What about exterior aesthetics? Well, you'll also want to get those right. Unless you want your e-tron in the only standard colour, solid, brilliant black, you'll need to be paying your Audi Centre for one of the optional metallic colours. We've got Galaxy Blue here. There's also a range of even pricier, exclusive shades. And on this standard model, there are alternative 20 and 21-inch wheel designs too. Whatever alloy rims you choose, you might want to add in the optional orange e-tron brake calipers. You can specify roof rails, of course, finished either in aluminium, as here, or in black. Inside, you're going to want to get the look and feel of the cabin right. The standard twin leather upholstery can, without extra cost, be specified in either pearl beige or okapi brown if you don't like the standard black. An optional twin leather pack can extend the hide onto the upper section of the dashboard, and as part of that deal, you also get artificial leather added onto the door armrests and the lower part of the centre console. If you'd like a higher level of seat upholstery, you can upgrade it to softer Valcona leather, finished in black, Okapi brown, or Metropolis grey as part of a £2,000 pack that also gives you front sports seats and Alcantara door trims. Whatever style of leather you favour, you can have it with classy contrast stitching if you pay extra for a design selection pack, which also includes the multicoloured extended LED interior lighting we mentioned earlier. You might also want to consider upgrading the interior inlays too. Graphite grey panelling is supplied as standard. For a little more though, you could have either dark matte brushed aluminium, fine grain ash in natural volcanic grey, or if you like a clubby look, natural brown walnut. Front and rear illuminated door sills are also optional. On to practicalities. Now, if you don't want to be stuck by the side of the road fiddling with a tyre repair kit the next time you have a puncture, you'd be wise to budget the extra £3,000 Audi wants for its optional collapsible spare wheel and jack. Not all EVs allow you to fit a tow bar. This one does and includes trailer stabilisation with it. And for the inside, well, here we've got the storage and luggage pack, which includes a series of additions that really ought to be standard. 2 cup holders in the rear central armrest, storage space lining in the spare wheel well, side nets in the luggage compartment and a luggage net for the boot. For that cargo area, we'd also recommend you get the optional reversible mat, a variable folding luggage compartment mat that can, if necessary, even cover the whole area when the back seats are folded down. Enough with optional features, let's move on to look at safety. Now, before we get into all the electronic stuff, we ought to make the point that this car is fundamentally very safe. A strong, enclosing frame of sophisticated aluminium crash structures implemented to protect this e-tron's high-voltage battery, making this car extremely rigid and crash-resistant. Plus, there are Isofix child seat mountings, a tyre pressure warning light, and all the usual front, side and curtain airbags too, with rear side bags available as an option. Should the worst happen and you have a crash that activates the airbags, a standard Audi Connect safety and service feature will automatically alert the emergency services with your exact GPS location. But of course, the primary purpose of modern safety technology is to avoid an accident in the first place, which is the task of a whole armoury of electronic camera-driven features. As you'd expect in this day and age, there's an autonomous braking system included in that roster. Ingolstadt calls its setup Audi Presense Front and Basic. And like other similar packages, this one scans the road ahead, looking for potential accident hazards as you drive, and will automatically brake the car to try and avoid them if you don't respond to warnings. The basic element of this system refers to the way that it will also instantly act to give you the maximum chance of survival if an unavoidable accident is detected, tightening seatbelts, closing windows and even shutting the panoramic roof if one has been fitted. As you might expect, for the money being asked here, there's also a lane departure warning setup that works between 37 and 124 miles an hour, issuing a warning if you drift out of your lane on the highway and applies subtle steering assistance to ease you back to where you should be. There's also distance warning, which alerts you if you're getting too close to the vehicle in front. High beam assist, which automatically dips your headlights for you at night. And rest recommendation, which alerts you if drowsiness is detected in your driving reactions. It's always possible to go further, though, and should you want extra peace of mind, your Audi Centre salesperson will doubtless point you towards the 2 extra cost safety packs on offer. Let's start with the City Assist pack, which includes 5 main features. Side Assist works as a blind spot monitor, warning you on the move if you're dangerously about to pull out to overtake in the path of another vehicle. Cross-Traffic Assist Front warns of dangerous cross-traffic movements at junctions and can, if necessary, automatically apply the brakes, preventing an accident. Cross-Traffic Assist Rear warns you of oncoming traffic when you're reversing out of a space. Presense Rear works on the move and warns you via a flashing light if you're about to be hit from behind so that you can try and take avoiding action. And Exit Warning warns the driver of potential dangers of traffic approaching from the rear when a door is opened. The other key optional safety pack you can specify is the Tour Pack, which is also based around camera-driven features. There are 6 included. Arguably, the cleverest part of the package is Adaptive Cruise Assist, which uses a radar sensor, a laser scanner, a front camera, and ultrasonic sensors, all networked together to permanently monitor your e-tron's surroundings. Drawing on feedback from these systems, plus local speed restrictions and navigation data, Adaptive Cruise Assist works with an integrated predictive efficiency assistant to proactively control acceleration, braking, lane positioning, and distance to the vehicle in front, all at any speed and with functionality that's equally effective whether you're stuck in traffic or completely alone on the road. It's very clever. As for the 4 other Tour Pack features, well, there's traffic sign recognition, which can picture road signs and display them on the dash. Then there's Turn Assist, which detects approaching vehicles at junctions when the turn indicators are activated and won't let you move off dangerously in front of approaching traffic. Plus, there's a Collision Avoidance Assistant, which supports the driver's actions during an avoidance manoeuvre, adding in additional steering torque and reducing the likelihood of a collision or of swerving off the road. Finally, as part of this pack, there's also an emergency assist element added to the standard lane departure warning system that's able to autonomously bring the car to a safe, controlled stop if you don't respond to repeated warnings about drifting out of your lane, as might be the case if, for example, you were suddenly taken ill at the wheel. It all means that in driving an e-tron, there can potentially be a lot of safety systems to oversee, particularly if you've ticked a few options boxes. So how on earth can you monitor all the different features in everyday driving and decide which ones you want to activate at any given time? Well, Audi has tried to simplify that process here by providing a driver assist button at the bottom of the centre stack, there to allow the selection of the kind of electronic security blanket you want. Basic includes only the most important items, Maximum gives you everything, and Individual allows you to pick and choose the features you want activated. At the lowest driver assist level, Basic, there's that standard pre-sense autonomous braking system, and if, as here, you've specified that optional Tour Pack, Emergency Assist, the top Maximum driver assist setting adds all the extra camera safety features you've specified. To be honest, we don't really understand why you'd ever want to turn available safety features off, but when all of them are activated here, it's certainly very reassuring. Much of the secret when it comes to creating the ideal luxury EV lies in the delicate balance between battery capacity and weight. The e-tron's 95 kilowatt-hour battery is larger than the one its European rivals use. Jaguar's I-Pace has a 90 kilowatt-hour unit, the Mercedes EQC has 80 kilowatt-hour, and the BMW iX3 just 70 kilowatt-hour. But this Audi needs those extra cells, because it's easily the weightiest car in its class. With an empty curb weight of 2,490 kilos, it's 65 kilos heavier than an EQC and a massive 282 kilos heavier than an I-Pace. Which is why, even with the 95 kilowatt-hour unit fitted, this e-tron's 241-mile WLTP-rated operating range is a little less than can be offered by those European rivals. Measured under the same WLTP cycle, an iX3 goes 249 miles, an EQC 259 miles, and an I-Pace 292 miles. At the time of this test, the most comparably priced standard range version of the Tesla Model X could go just 230 miles, but Tesla mostly focuses on the long-range 100 kilowatt-hour versions of that car, which can go up to 315 miles. As anyone with a top Tesla will tell you, replenishing a high-energy capacity battery isn't for the faint-hearted. To get a feel for that, we'll tell you that if you connected this e-tron up to an ordinary household 3-pin plug, it would take 42 hours to charge itself from empty. Audi says you never would, preferring to talk about the way that a 150 kilowatt public charging point would enable up to 80% of battery capacity to be replenished in just 30 minutes. Unfortunately, though, at the time of this test, the summer of 2019, there weren't any 150 kilowatt charging points in the UK. But the Ingolstadt brand has partnered with Shell, Ford, the BMW Group and other VW Group brands to create Ionity, a joint venture aimed at establishing a European high-power charging network. By 2020, Ionity will have installed more than 400 150 kilowatt charge stations across Europe, 40 of those in the UK, with more to follow. To begin with, you'll need a card to unlock the charging points, but shortly technology will be introduced that will allow your e-tron to authorise itself and remotely unlock the charging station. It sounds good, but the reality is that for the time being, finding a decently capable public charging point is still pretty difficult. You're more likely to come across a 50 kilowatt public point, which can take your e-tron's battery from 20% capacity to 80% in 70 minutes. But even these are quite an unusual sight in this country. At the time of this test, there were only 3,178 50 kilowatt chargers serving the whole of the UK. Fortunately, most of your charging with this car will be done at home once you've fitted the 7 kilowatt wall box that Audi's electrification partner PodPoint recommends. After subtraction of the various available £500 government grants, this will cost you £359, and once installed, it will replenish your e-tron from empty in 14 hours, which, to give you some segment perspective, is just over an hour longer than a rival Jaguar I-Pace would need. It works out to roughly 18 miles of range per hour. Either way, the claims here of full overnight charging are only just about justified and won't add up at all if you happen to have a late night and an early start. As usual with electric cars, there's an app to allow you to set charging times using your smartphone. If your home has the solar charging panels that work with a photovoltaic system, the car can be set to charge preferentially using sunlight-sourced electricity and can even be set to charge in line with forecast phases of sunshine. However you replenish the batteries, if reducing charging duration is a priority, ask your Audi centre about the optional second onboard charger that's been developed for this car, which is apparently able to significantly increase charging speed to 22 kilowatts. At the time of this test, there were 19,000 charge points at over 6,500 locations across the UK and over 45,000 across Europe. Websites like ZapMap are good for helping you find the one nearest to you. Or you can use the MMI Infotainment System's integrated e-tron route planner to organise your journey between charge stations. Bear in mind that the cost of charging publicly will be a little higher than you'll pay at home. For reference, if you choose off-peak tariffs with your garage wall box, charging your e-tron could cost you as little as 14 pence per kilowatt hour, which means that charging your e-tron could cost you as little as 5.4 pence per mile. With all we've said about potential charging difficulties, it's possible that we're painting an unnecessarily bleak picture here. Obviously, it's very unlikely that a typical e-tron owner will be running this model as an only car, and we're perfectly aware that the average person's daily round-trip commute is about a tenth of the operating range of this Audi. Ah yes, range. The WLTP, or World Harmonised Light Vehicle Test Procedure figures we mentioned earlier, are nowhere near as pie in the sky as the range readings we used to get quoted under the old NEDC, or New European Driving Cycle Test regime, but they're still pretty fictional. Based on this test, we're perfectly prepared to believe that 200 miles would be possible between charges in this e-tron. But the point is that to achieve that, you'd have to be driving the car in the kind of fashion that would never really allow you to enjoy it. Base your journeys around a 170 to 180 mile operating range, and we think you'll be being a lot more realistic. Maybe a bit less than that in really cold weather. When it comes to maximising driving range, like most EVs, this car pitches in to help quite a lot. There's an efficiency Drive Select driving mode you can activate, and in the Drive Select individual setting, you can keep the drive system in its most efficient setting, even if you want to alter the parameters of other elements like the suspension and the steering to better suit your mood. Separate from Drive Select in the vehicle information part of the centre screen's car section, there's also a selectable range mode that more aggressively moves the car into a more economical setting by reducing power output and maximum speed at the same time as dialing back the energy consumption of convenience features like the climate control system. A more proactive way of increasing the distance you can travel in this car between charges lies in the effective use of its various braking regeneration options, which Audi reckons are the most efficient on the market. Not everyone likes the way that aggressive brake regeneration can virtually bring the car to a stop all on its own, which is why you can turn this feature off or dial it back. The centre screen's efficiency assist section allows you to switch between automatic and manual brake recuperation. When the whole setup's working to its max, it really does make a big difference, reclaiming spent energy as you cruise, slow or stop. When the regeneration system's fully active and you take your foot off the accelerator, the electric motors work in reverse, becoming generators of electricity to recharge the battery. In fact, on a hilly road with regeneration set to the max, it's possible to gain as much as 70% of the energy you use going uphill through regenerative braking on the way down. Other useful EV features on the higher central MMI screen include a range potential screen showing the extra distance you can travel by turning certain convenience features like the climate control off that can actually make quite a difference. Plus, there's a total range screen which shows your remaining distance graphically and digitally, and a charging screen which tells you your battery level and, if you're connected up, exactly how long you still have to charge for. What else? Well, we should also mention the integrated heat pump, which harvests heat from both the outside air and the car's electrical components. The collected heat transforms a special liquid within the heat pump into a gas, which causes it to rise in temperature. That warmth is then transferred to the cabin via the heating and ventilation system, thereby reducing the power demand from the vehicle battery on colder days and maximising driving range. Slippery aerodynamics also play a useful part in overall efficiency. Elsewhere in this film, we've mentioned this car's pretty sleek 0.28 CD drag factor, or 0.27 CD if you add in the virtual exterior mirrors, a difference which can apparently add up to 3.7 extra miles of range. Well, that slippery showing is aided by the sleek, smooth underbody area, an adjustable cooling air intake behind the single-frame front grille, and just below it, integrated air curtains that efficiently channel airflow across the wheels and back along the sides of the car. What else might you need to know? Maybe you'll be interested in the fact that as an EV vehicle owner, you'll be exempt from the London congestion charge. And for the second year of ownership, you won't have to pay an annual VED tax disc charge. For company car users, electric vehicles offer potentially huge tax savings as they incur benefit-in-kind taxation fixed at just 9%. As for ownership peace of mind, well, you're limited to the usual unremarkable 3-year or 60,000-mile Audi warranty. You can extend it to 5 years at extra cost, but you shouldn't have to. The battery is covered by its own 8-year or 100,000-mile warranty, the same as Jaguar offers, but slightly inferior to Tesla's deal, which covers the battery over 8 years for an unlimited mileage. Maintenance is obviously more straightforward than it would be for a combustion engine model. An electric vehicle does, after all, have 20% fewer moving parts. There's no fuel tank, no exhaust system, and obviously no internal combustion engine. You wouldn't think that, though, to look at the service intervals needed by some of this car's direct rivals. A Jaguar I-Pace, for instance, needs a garage visit every 21,000 miles. With the E-tron, it's every 30,000 miles or every 2 years, whichever comes first. As usual, it'll probably be sensible to consider one of Audi's service plans that cover you for virtually everything in advance. There are 4 plans available, ranging from 2 years and 18,000 miles to 4 years and 36,000 miles. Insurance is a top-of-the-shop Group 50E. Brokers, it seems, don't like electric cars. Still, the news is almost universally positive when it comes to residual value. According to industry experts CAP, this e-tron 55 Quattro will still be worth 65% of its original value after 3 years or 60,000 miles of use. Direct rivals struggle to match that kind of showing. For a Jaguar I-Pace EV400 SE, the figure's 59%, while for a Tesla Model X 100D, the figure is 58%. As a result, an e-tron should be very cost-effective to lease for company or private drivers. And what about the green issues? Well, Audi's done its best here. The e-tron's built in Brussels at one of the industry's first carbon-neutral plants and has been supplied with 100% ecologically generated electricity since 2012, which isn't enough to satisfy some in the green lobby who get very angry about the whole pure electric car zero emissions ethos. They reckon that ignores the well-to-wheel demands of supplying the electricity that powers cars of this kind. We'd respond by pointing out that these people usually completely overlook the fact that CO2 figures for conventional cars fail to take into account the logistical cost of getting fuel to the pump. Still, if you're one of those enviro-conscious folk, we'll tell you using a well-to-wheels calculation based on typical use of the UK's energy grid, taking an average UK grid CO2 contribution of 367 grams per kilowatt. The burden of filling your batteries in this car will result in a theoretical 87.3 grams per kilometre of CO2 being released into the atmosphere. That's certainly good, but some way from being completely green. Which is also a comment you could apply to electric vehicle engineering as a whole. Lithium-ion batteries aren't recyclable in the way that the fuel cells used in hydrogen-powered vehicles are. Currently, when EV vehicles are reaching the end of their lives, the batteries are being reused as electricity storage buffers. After that, though, they can't simply be scrapped because lithium ion has explosive elements. So these batteries are simply being buried in landfills, which is hardly sustainable in the long term for humankind. But then, nor is the pollution caused by combustion power. If you see the EV solution as the lesser of the two evils, and your choice of a battery-powered model must be from the luxury segment, we think you'll find plenty to interest you here. So here we are at the real start of Audi's electrified adventure. The company's cut no corners here, and there's a level of polish to this product that no rival luxury EV can surpass. Some, encouraged by the conservative looks, jump to the lazy conclusion that Ingolstadt hasn't done much to advance the segment standard with this car, but actually the e-tron offers a number of engineering elements that rivals could learn from. The clever electro-hydraulic brake control system and the virtual mirrors are the most obvious examples of that. And we like the fact that, unlike Jaguar, Audi is investing in the kind of charging infrastructure that cars like this will need if they're to be truly everyday usable. Ingolstadt hasn't committed to that to the same level as Tesla, though, which is why we'd understand if you admired an e-tron but came to the realisation that a Tesla model would be easier to keep fully charged when out and about. Tesla needs that advantage because in almost every other regard, Audi has produced a superior EV product in this e-tron, provided you don't need the flexibility of 7 seats. Because it feels less of an automotive appliance and more of a genuine luxury car, it's easier to seamlessly adapt to what's on offer here from something more conventional. Particularly if you're coming to e-tron ownership from one of Ingolstadt's more usual fossil-fuelled products. This model is, as advertised, very Audi. So you'll have to like the brand to want one, but if you do, a future that's very Vorsprung durch elektrisch beckons. As with rivals, we still think driving range will be a dissuading factor for many buyers. Cars like this won't be fully accessible until their owners can jump in and embark upon a 5-hour round trip without a thought. You still can't quite do that with an e-tron, but if that's not an issue, you'll find much to like here if you appreciate Audi's cool, understated, considered approach to luxury motoring. We're still not completely convinced that electrification is the long-term key to automotive sustainability, but Audi is And proof of that potential is delivered right here.